Alrighty, everyone. How's it going? I think everything is working properly. Did I unmute? We unmuted ourselves. Huge, huge. Okay. Do we actually? We actually did it, chat. We actually did everything properly during the transition. We even printed off a bookmark. Look at how fancy we are. Alrighty. Well, in case y'all do not know, we did a little bit of rebranding here, including rebranding our website. So now instead of having like links.thetrashcan, it is just the trashcan.space. You can find our merch on there. You can find all of the website, like all of our links to stuff, our wish list, everything in one place now. That being said, hello everyone. Today we are going to be continuing to read one of my favorite books known as The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Daniel Whiskey. I probably mispronounced that. I don't know how far we're going to get. It is going to be a slightly shorter stream today, but I mean, I think like shorter, like 2 hours, so it's not that short, chat. Anyways, we're going to make sure that there's no ads running right now. We're going to make sure that stuff is working properly. We even got a new, look, we got a new sub goal too, chat. Pog. Hello, Galaxy Cat. How are you? Oh no, the sub goal blocks the thingy. Needs to go even smaller. 1 second. Oh, we probably will have to do, oh gosh, I'll have to do like an alert. It's all good. Welcome on in. How's it going? Alrighty, so we are on chapter 3 of The House of Leaves. Last time we got into the introduction. I am doing pretty good. I cannot complain. Last time we got into the introduction bit in which our main character, Johnny, found a book written by an older... Oh, fuck. Their ads are starting in 5 seconds. We're going to give that a second. Damn it. We gotta do the last time on, but I can't do the last time on until we're back. You know, that seems like a bit awkward. Let's put on some music while we wait. Chat, this music kind of slaps. Hold up, wait. Let me go find the song I want to show you guys. I wish I could use this music. Like, I want to buy the rights to this song, but I don't know where to buy it, chat, so we can't actually use it for anything. But this song is so good. It slaps so hard. You at the stake where you belong. Right. That's just gonna bug me. I'm sorry, did we break the ad time? What? How did we break the ad timer? Oh no. Twitch broke the ad timer, chat. Ah. Is it gonna go away when the ads are over? Is the ad timer gonna go away? Is it gonna be stuck there? Hello, Moby. How are you? I think we broke the ad timer, chat. It's stuck. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay, Hodl. I think it worked this time. I have been doing pretty good. Busy as always. What do you expect? But other than that, pretty darn good. Today, we are going to be continuing our read-through of The House of Leaves in the previous segment chat, which you can find on the VOD channel. We started the book with the introduction to The House of Leaves, specifically the introduction from our main character, Johnny. Johnny found a book written by an old man who had died in an apartment complex that his friend worked at. It's the TikTok audio, what happened to him, he died. Valid. I mean, Zampano did die. Zampano did die at the opening of the story, and what Johnny found was a book. And a book that contains a story about the Novidzin record. What Zampano claims to be a film but no record has ever been found of it. And oftentimes the book makes references or call outs to people that just don't exist or have never said anything like it. So one of the reasons I honestly adore this book is how it uses visual storytelling as a part of its narrative. And by that, I mean, chat, you can see here, this is from Zampano, and then you see the font change. The font change is when we get into Johnny talking, and I'll try to always give a little like pre-warning of when we're switching characters, because Zampano is the one who wrote the book. Johnny is reading and annotating as well. So I think without further ado, we can get into it. I do apologize. I'm not going to be able to read Hebrew. I think that's Hebrew. It's either Hebrew or Arabic. Regardless, I cannot read that. But they have a little translation for us at the very bottom, so we'll go with that. It is no accident that the photographer becomes a photographer any more than a lion tamer becomes a lion tamer. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt?" is the translation of, I believe, the Hebrew. Why Navidzin? Why not someone else? When the great Florentine house Mal I perche venire, osci el concide I non ina io non parlo sono. Homer River calls him and then we get into Johnny. Dante again translated by Sinclair, Canto 2, lines 31 through 32. But why should I go there, and who grants it? I am not Aeneas, I am not Paul. A question I'm often asking myself these days, though not the not Aeneas and Paul part. The simple answer, I know, Lude woke me up at 3 a.m. to check out some dead guy stuff. Of course, it's not really all that simple. Typically, when Lude calls me late at night, it's because there's some party he wants to hit. He's the kind of guy who thinks sublime is something you choke on after a shot of tequila. Maybe he's right. Not that this matters. Someone once told me Lude's real name is Harry. Maybe he did, though no one I know has ever called him that. Lude knows every bar, club, and gatekeeper at every bar and club. Hollywood has always been mother's milk to Lude. Mother's tongue, whatever. Unlike me, he never needs to translate, interpret, or learn in L.A. He knows. He knows the drinks, the addresses, and most important of L.A., he knows. I just had a dyslexia over there. Sorry, Chad. He knows the drinks, the addresses, and most important of all, he can usually tell the difference between the women who are out to talk and those out to do something a little more interesting, which always interests Lude. Despite a nose that others have described as a B-battered, Lude's always surrounded by very attractive women, which is pretty much the norm for hairstylists and photographers, especially if they're good. And Lude is that. Beautiful women are always drawn to men they think will keep them beautiful. During the past 2 years, he and I have spent a good deal of time wandering all over this odd city. We both thrive in the late hours, appreciate its sad taste, and never get in the way of each other's dreams. Even though Lude just wants more money, better parties, and prettier girls, and I want something else. I'm not sure what to call it anymore, except I know it feels roomy, and it's drenched in sunlight, and it's weightless, and I know it's not cheap. Probably not even real. Who can guess why Lude and I have ended up friends? I think it's mainly because he recognizes that I'm game for any misstep he is in mind, and he enjoys the company. Of course, publicly, Lude likes to throw me plenty of props, invariably focusing on the disjointed life I've led. He's still impressed, and in turn likes to impress others with the fact that at the age of 13, I went to work in Alaska, and by the time I was 18, had already slept in a whorehouse in Rome. Most of all, though he loves the stories, especially the way I tell them to the girls we met. I already got into this a little. Wow, I am having a struggle time reading today, chat. I already got into this a little with the whole riff on the boxing and the birds of paradise and some guy named Punching Bag. But they're only stories, the way I tell them, I mean. I actually have a whole bunch. Take the scars, for instance. There are a number of variations on that one. The most popular is the 2-year stint in a Japanese martial arts cult made up entirely of Koreans living in Idaho who, on the last day of my initiation into their now defunct brotherhood, made me pick up a scalding metal wok using only my bare forearms. In the past, the wok had been heated in a kiln. Recently, it had been full of red-hot coals. The story's an absolute crock of shit. Or should I say a walk of shit? Sorry. I know. I should learn to crawl before I walk. Sorry again. I mean, for not being sorry the first time or for the matter of the second time, but you see, it's so hard to argue with all of those little whirls of melted flesh. Show them your arms, Johnny Lude will always say in his most offhand, over-the-top manner. Oh, come on. Well, all right, just this once. I roll up my left sleeve and then, taking my time, I roll up my right one. He got that in a cold in Indiana, Idaho. I correct him, and it goes on from there. I'm sure most women know his bowl, but hey, they're entertained. I also think it's somewhat of a relief not to hear the true story. I mean, you look at the horror sweeping all the way down my wrist to my elbows, and you have to take a deep breath and ask yourself, do I really want to know what happened there? In my experience, most people don't. They usually look away. My stories actually help them look away. Maybe they even help me look away. But I guess that's nothing new. We all create stories to protect ourselves. It's March now, late March. 3 months have gone by since Lude called me up that night. 3 months as I dragged away a black, unremarkable, paint-stattered trunk, which, as I quickly found out, was one of those old Cedar Line jobbers built in Utica, New York. Special thanks to the C.M. Clapp Company. Complete with rusted latches, rotting leather handles, and a lifetime of digressions and disappointments. To date, I counted over 200 rejection letters from the various literary journals, publishing houses, and even a few words of discouragement from prominent professors in the East Coast universities. No one wanted the old man's words except me. What can I say? I'm a sucker for abandoned stuff, misplaced stuff, forgotten stuff, and any old stuff, which, despite the light of progress and all that, still vanishes every day like shadows at noon, goings unheralded, passings unmourned. Well, you get the drift. As a counselor once told me, a counselor for disaffected youth, I might add, you look like crap because it reminds you of you. Couldn't have said it better or put it more bluntly. Don't even disagree with it either. Seems pretty dead on and probably has everything to do with the fact that when I was 10, my father died, and almost 9 years later, my crazy Shakespearean mother followed him. A story I've already lived and really don't need to retell here. Still, for whatever reason, my counselor for disaffected youth could never explain. Accepting his analyses hardly altered the way I felt. I just glanced over at the trunk the first time I saw it. I mean, when I discovered what was inside, it appalled me, like I was staring at the old guy's corpse. Now it's just a trunk, of course. I also remember thinking I was going to toss it by the end of the week. That was before I started reading, long before I began putting it all together. You know, this is still the simple answer. I guess the complicated one I don't feel like getting into. And then we're transitioning back to Zampano's writings. Homer's rivals call him a coward and orders him to get moving because the powers above have already taken personal interest in his salvation. For Hell's cartographer, the answer is mildly satisfying. For Novidzin, however, there is no answer at all. During Exploration 4, he even asks aloud, how the fuck did I end up here? The house responds with resounding silence. No divine attention, not even an Amoric guide. Some have suggested the horrors Novidzin encountered in the house were merely manifestations of his own troubled psyche. Dr. Ivan Van Pullet, in his book The Incident, claims that the entire house is a physical incarnation of Novidzin's psychological pain. I often wonder how many things turned out if Novidzin had, how shall we say, done a little bit of house cleaning. While Pollitt is not alone in asserting that Novidzin's psychology profoundly influenced the nature of the rooms and hallways, few believe it conjured up that place. The reason is simple. Novidzin was not the first to live in this house and encounter its peril. As the Novidzin's real estate agent, Alicia Rosenbaum, eventually revealed, the house on Ashtree Lane had more than a few occupants, approximately 0.37 owners every year, most of whom were traumatized in some way. Considering the house was supposedly built back in 1720s, quite a few people have slept and suffered in those walls. If the house were indeed the product of psychological agonies, it would have been the collective product of every inhabitant's agonies. It is no great coincidence that it's no great coincidence then that eventually someone with a camera and zest for the dangerous would show up in this mead hall and confront the terror at the door. What do you mean what's going on? We're reading invited. Fortunately for audiences everywhere, that someone possessed extraordinary visual talents. We're reading The House of Leaves. Yippee. Novidzin's troubles may not have created the house, but they did ultimately shape the way he faced it. Novidzin's childhood was fairly bleak. His father was a St. Louis salesman who worked for a string of large electronics corporations, shuttling his family around the Midwest every 2 or 3 years. He was also sorry, my words are getting away from me today, Chad. He was also an alcoholic and prone toward violent outbursts or disappearing for long periods of time. Novidzin's mother was no better. Oh my gosh, why can I not read today? Goodness gracious. Novidzin's mother was no better. She soon left them all to pursue a career as an actress and ended up living in a sting of not so productive producers. Purportedly, I've never heard that word before. Purportedly, in her own words, all she ever wanted was to bring down the house. Novidzin's father died of congestive heart failure, but his mother just vanished. She was last seen in Los Angeles bar, smoking cigarettes and talking about moonlighting and why you can never find so much of it in Hollywood. Neither Will nor his twin brother Tom ever heard from her again. Because the enormous narcissism of their parents deprived Will and Tom of suitable role models, both brothers learned to identify with absence. Consequently, if something beneficial fortunately entered their lives, they immediately treated it as temporary. By the time they were teenagers, they were already accustomed to the discontinuous lifestyle marked by constant threats of abandonment and the lack of emotional stability. Unfortunately, accustomed to here is really synonymous with damaged by. Perhaps one reason Novidzin became so enamored with photography was the way it gave permanence to moments that were so often fleeting. Nevertheless, not even 10,000 photographs could secure a world, and so while Novidzin may have worked harder, taken greater risks, and become increasingly more successful, he was ultimately misled in feeling that his labor could make up for love he was deprived of as a child, and ultimately the sense of security such love bestows. For that reason, we should again revisit Novidzin on the porch, his gaze fixed, his delicate fingers wrapped around a glass of lemonade. I just thought it would be nice to see how people move into a place and start to inhabit it, he calmly announces. Settle in, maybe put down roots, interact, hopefully understand each other a little bit better. Personally, I just want to create a cozy little outpost for me and my family. A pretty innocuous and laconic rumination, and yet it contains one particularly nettlesome word. By definition, outpost means a base, military or other, which while safe inside, functions principally to provide protection from hostile forces found on the outside. This always seemed a bizarre word to choose to describe a small house in the Virginia countryside, but it does shed some light on why Novidzin undertook the project in the first place. More than just snapping a few pictures and recording daily events with a few high eights, Novidzin wanted to use images to create an outpost set against the transience of the world. No wonder he found it impossible to give up his professional occupation. In his mind, abandoning photography meant submitting to loss. Therefore, to revisit our first two questions, why Novidzin? Considering the practicality, pre-Adamite history of the house, it was inevitable someone like Novidzin would eventually enter those rooms. Why not someone else? Considering his own history, talent, and emotional background, only Navidson could have gone as deep as he did and still successfully brought the vision back. Faith, sir, as to that matter, I don't believe one half of it myself. Diedrich Knickerbocker. That's a name. In early June of 1990, the Davidsons flew to Seattle for a wedding, where when they returned, something in the house had changed. Though they had only been away for 4 days, the change was enormous. It was not, however, obvious, like for instance a fire or a robbery or an act of vandalism. Quite the contrary, the horror was atypical. No one could deny there had been an intrusion, but it was so odd no one knew how to respond. On video, we see Navidson acting almost amused while Karen simply draws both hands to her face as if she was about to pray. Their children Chad and Daisy run through it, playing, giggling, completely oblivious to the deeper implications. What took place amounts to strange spatial violations, which has already been described in a number of ways, namely, surprisingly, unsettling, disturbing, but most of all, uncanny. In German, the word for uncanny is unheimlich, while Heidegger, in his book Sein und Zeit, thought worthy of some consideration. Chat, do you want me to try to read the German, or do you want me just to skip to the translation? I'm going to butcher the German, I would like to add, so... Because the first word is "Dab die Angst aus Gunderfilische." No, I'm going to skip the translation. I cannot read this, chat. And here's the English translation, thanks to John Macquarie and Edward Robinson's, translated of Heidegger's Being and Time, Harper and Row, 1962, page 233. A real bitch to find. In anxiety, one feels uncanny. Here, the peculiar indefiniteness of which Dyson finds itself alongside in anxiety comes proximately to expression. The nothing and nowhere. But here, uncanniness also means not being at home. In our first indication of the phenomenal character of Dyson's basic state, and in our clarification of the existential meaning of being in, as distinguished from the categorical significance of insidiousness, being in was defined as residing alongside, being familiar with. This character of being in was then brought to view more concretely through the everyday publicness of the they, which brings tranquilized self-assurance, being at home, with all of its obviousness into an average everydayness of Dyson. It, back from its absorption in the world, everyday familiarity collapses. Dyson has been individualized, but individualized as being in the world. Being in enters into this existential mode of the not at home. Nothing else is meant by our talk about uncanniness. And this is again Johnny speaking. Which only goes to prove the existence of crackback in the early 20th century. Certainly this geezer must have gotten hung up on the pretty wicked rock habit to start spouting such nonsense. Crazier still, I've just now been wondering if something about this passage may have affected me, which I don't know exactly, which I know doesn't exactly follow, especially since this would imply that something in it really does make sense, and I just got finished calling it nonsense. I don't know. The point is, when I copied down the German a few weeks ago, I was fine. Last night, I found the translation, and this morning when I went to work, I didn't feel all myself. It's probably just a coincidence. I mean, there's some kind of connection between my state of mind and the Davidson record, or even a few arcane sentences on existence penned by a former Nazi tweaking on who knows what. More than likely, it's something entirely else. The real root lying already in my already strange mood fluctuations, though I guess those are pretty recent too. Rolling back and forth between wishful thinking and some private agony until the bar breaks. I have no fucking clue. Das nicht zu Hause, not being at home. That part's definitely true. These days, I'm an apprentice at a tattoo shop on Sunset. I answer phones, schedule consultations, and clean up. Any idiot can handle it. In fact, the job's reserved for idiots. This afternoon, though, how do I explain it? Something's really off. I'm off. I can't do a fucking thing. I've just been staring at the ink we have. That wild variety of color. Everything from root beer, midnight blue, and cochineal to mauve, light dough, lilac, southern green, maize, even pelican black, all lined up in these plastic cups like tiny transparent thimbles. And needles too, my eyes catching on all those carefully preserved points, and we have hundreds. Mostly number 12 sharps, many singles, though plenty in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 needle groups, even a 14 round shader. It depends on what you need. I don't know what I need, but for no apparent reason, I'm going terribly south. Nothing has happened, absolutely nothing, but I'm still having problems breathing. The air in the shop is admittedly thick with the smell of sweat, isopropyl alcohol, benzol, all that solution for the ultrasonic cleaner, even solder and flux, but that's not it either. Of course, no one notices. My boss, a retinue of his friends, some new inductee who just got put down 150 for a rose. Keep up the chatters. Pretty loud chatter too, though never quite enough to drown out the most important sound of all, the single insistent buzz of the original J tattoo machine, logging yet another 100 stabs a minute in the dimple of some chunky ass. That's a line, chat. The dimple of some chunky ass, damn. I get a glass of water. I walk out into the hallway. That's a mistake. I should have stayed near people. The comfort of company and all that. Instead, I'm alone, running through a quick mental checklist. Food poisoning, stomach's fine. Withdrawals, haven't been on GAC or ecstasy diet for several months. And while I didn't smoke any pot this morning, my usual ritual, I know THC doesn't create lasting physical dependencies. And then out of the fucking blue, everything gets substantially darker. Not pitch black, mind you, not an even power failure black, more like a cloud passing over the sun. Maybe that is storm, though there is no storm, no clouds. It's a bright day, and anyways, I'm inside. I wish that had been all. Just a slight decrease in illumination and a little breathing difficulty could still blame on a blown fuse or something apparent drug-related flashback. But then my nostrils flare with the scent of something bitter and foul, something inhuman, reeking with so much rot and years, telling me in language of nausea that I am not alone. Something's behind me. Of course, I deny it. It's impossible to deny. I want to puke. To get a better idea of this, focus on these words, and whatever you do, don't let your eyes wander past the perimeter of this page. Now imagine just beyond your peripheral vision, maybe behind you, maybe to the side of you, maybe in front of you, but right where you cannot see it, something is quietly closing in on you. So quiet, in fact, that you can only hear it as silence. Find those pockets without sound. That's where it is. Right at this moment. But don't look. Keep your eyes here. Now take a deep breath. Go ahead, take an even deeper one. Only this time when you start to exhale, imagine how fast it will happen, how hard it's going to hit you, how many times it'll stab your jugular with its teeth, or are they nails? Don't worry, that particular detail doesn't matter because before you have time to even process that, you should be moving, you should be running, you should be at the very least flinging up your arms. You are sure to make hell. You're sure as hell should be getting rid of the book. You won't have time to even scream. Don't look. I didn't. Of course I looked. I looked so fucking fast I should have ended up wearing one of those neck braces for whiplash. My hands had gone all clammy. My face was burning up. Who knows how much adrenaline had just been dumped in my system. Before I turned, I felt exactly as if I had turned. And at that instant, caught sight of some tremendous beast crouched off in the shadows, muscles a twitch from firing its great mass forward, ragged claws slowly extending, digging into the linoleum, even as its eyes were dilating beyond the point of reason, completely obliterating the iris, and by that widening fire, the glowing furnace of which the camera lucida with me in silhouette like some silly hand shadow twitching about, registering at last the sign it must have been waiting for, my own recognition of exactly what has been awaiting me all along. Except that when I finally do turn, jerking around like the scared shitless shit for brains I am, I discover only a deserted corridor. Or was it merely recently deserted? This thing, whatever it had been, obviously beyond the grasp of my imagination, or for that matter my emotions, having departed the alcoves of darkness, seeping into corners and floors, cracks and outlets, gone even to the walls. Lights now normal, the smell history. Though my fingers still tremble and I've yet to stop choking on a large irregular gulps of air as I keep spinning around like a stupid top spinning around on top of nothing, looking everywhere, even though there's absolutely nothing. Nothing anywhere. I actually thought I was going to fall, and then just as abruptly as I'd been possessed by this fear, it left me, and I fell back into control. When I re-enter the shop, things are still as new. Things are still askew, but they at least seem manageable. The phone has been ringing 9 times and counting. My boss announces he's clearly annoyed. More annoyed when I express some surprise over his ability to count that high. I picked up before he could start yammering at me about my attitude. The call's for me. Lou's on a payphone in the valley with important information. Apparently there's some significant doings at some significant club, he tells me. He tells me he can guest list my boss and any cohorts I deem worthy. Sure, I say. I still feel shaken and quickly lose hold of the details when I realize I've just forgotten something else as well, something very important, by which the time I hang up, no matter how hard I try, I can no longer remember what I'd meant to remember when it first entered my head. Or had it. Maybe it hadn't entered my head at all. Maybe it just brushed past me. Oh, ads are running, chat. We're gonna give it a pause there. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, that's sad that the ad thing stopped working. I found the mark. Oh, chat? Chat, we might actually have our last person for a totally normal game of Uno. Chat, we have the people for a totally normal game of Uno. Chat. Okay, so for how long has it been now? For about little less than a month, have been trying to collect streamers like Infinity Stones to play a lovely game of Uno, chat. And I think we now finally have it. We have our last person, chat. Yippee! So that means we can actually play a lovely game of Uno coming up soon. Isn't that so cool, chat? I'm so happy. So yeah, hell yeah, chat. Now we can actually, do the good shit. So I'll have to plan that a little bit later, but that comes at another time. For now, hey, more House of Leaves. How's it going, Slime? We also have Pog. How's it going? How are you? I decided to make this a sub goal because I'm not giving y'all that shit for free. Maybe it had just brushed past me, like something easing by in a dark room, the face lost in shadow. Nevertheless, regardless of my thoughts lost in another conversation, though something in her movement or perfume is distinguishingly familiar. Though how familiar is impossible to tell, because by the time I realize she's someone I should know, she's already gone deep into the den, beyond the bar, taking with her any chance of recognition. Though she hadn't left, she's still there, embracing shadows. Is that it? Had I been thinking of a woman? I don't know. I hope it doesn't matter. I have a terrifying feeling it does. Let's get back from a second date. Poggies? Poggies? We love women. Pog. Also, Slime, look at our 2 new emotes. And we're back to the Novidzin record with Zimpano. Nevertheless, regardless of how extensive his analysis is here, Heidegger still fails to point out the Uchelmik, when used as an adverb, means dreadfully, awfully, heaps of, and an awful lot of. Largeness has always been a condition of the weird and unsafe. I love the Zoomies one. I know, he's also high on coke, so it's called Coke Zoomies. Thus, that which is uncanny or unhilmic is neither homey nor protective, nor comforting nor familiar. It is alien, exposed and unsettling, or in other words, the perfect description of the house on Ash Tree Lane. In their absence, the Novidzins' home had become something else, and while not exactly sinister or even threatening, the change still destroyed any sense of security or well-being. Upstairs in the master bedroom, we discover that along with Will and Karen, a plain white door with a glass knob. It does not, however, open into the children's room, but into a space resembling a walk-in closet. However, unlike other closets in this house, this one lacks outlets, sockets, switches, shelves, a rod on which to hang things, or even some decorative molding. Instead, the walls are perfectly smooth and almost pure black because there is a slightly gray quality to the surface. The space can not be more than 5 feet wide and at most 4 feet long. On the opposite end, a second door, identical to the first one, opens up into the children's bedroom. Novidzin immediately asks whether or not they overlooked this room. This seems ridiculous at first, until one considers how the impact of such an implausible piece of reality could force anyone to question their own perceptions. Karen, however, manages to dig up some photos which clearly show the bedroom wall without a door. The next question is whether or not someone could have broken in the last 4 days, constructed this peculiar addition. Improbable, to say the least. Their final thought is that someone came in and uncovered it. Just installed 2 doors, but why? What's that matter? To quote Rilke, neatly translates as who, which I happen to find in this poem, Orpheus, Eurydice, and Hermes. The book's called The Selected Poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke, edited and translated by Stephen Mitchell, 1989, see page 53, Vintage International. Novidzin does check the high 8s, but only discovers the motion sensors were never triggered. Only their exit and re-entrance exist on tape. Virtually a week seamlessly edited past, showing us that the family, as they depart the house without that strange interior space present, only to return a fraction of a second later to find it already in place, almost as it had been there all along. Since the discovery occurred in the evening, the Novidzins' inquiry must wait until morning. And so, while Chad and Daisy sleep, we watch Karen and Will suffer through a restless night. Hillary, their 1-year-old Siberian Husky, and Mallory, their tabby cat, lie on either side of the 24-inch Sony TV, unperturbed by the new closet or the flicker from the tube or the drone from the speakers. Letterman. New revelations regarding that Iran-Contra affair reruns the traffic of information, assuring everyone that the rest of the world is still out there, continuing on as usual, even if 2 new doors now stand open, providing a view across a new space of darkness from parent's room to child's room, where a tiny nightlight of the Starship Enterprise burns like some North Star. It's a beautiful shot, in fact. The composition and elegant balance of colors, not only to mention the lush contrast of lights and darks, are so exquisite, they temporarily distract us from any question concerning the house or the events unfolding there. It seems a perfect example of Novidzin's unparalleled talent and illustrates why few, if any, could have accomplished what he did, especially towards the end. The following day, both Karen and Will pursue the most rational course. They acquire the architectural blueprints for their local real estate office. As might have been expected, these blueprints are not actual building plans, but were drawn up in 1981 when the former owners sought permission from the town zoning board to construct an L. The L, however, was ultimately never built, as the owners soon sold the property, claiming they needed something a little smaller. Though the designs, as they appear on screen, do not show a room or closet, they do confirm the existence of a strange crawl space, roughly 4 feet wide, running between both bedrooms. Alicia Rosenbaum, the real estate agent responsible for selling them the house, gives the camera a bewildering shrug when Karen asks if they had any idea who could be responsible for this outrage. Unable to say anything useful, Miss Rosenbaum finally asks if they want to call the police, which, amusingly enough, they do. That afternoon, 2 officers arrive, examine the closet, and try to hide the fact that this has to be the weirdest call they have ever made. First time chatter. Hello, good birth. How are you? Welcome on in. I, in case you do not know, am Ava. I am a 21-year-old gender fluid femboy whose pronouns are he, she, they. And if you are so motherfucking inclined, a little bitch, we do stuff on here. We play video games. Right now, we're reading The House of Leaves, which is a really great book. So if you would like to join for story time, feel free to grab a snack on the game show then at Doug's. Yeah, I remember. I'm liking the reading. I love this book. So for a little bit of backstory, we'll take a pause here. This book is detailing the spiral into insanity of a man named Johnny. He finds a body at the opening of this book of Zampano, who his friend Lude called him at 3 a.m. to come investigate. In Zampano's apartment, he finds an old black chest. He drags that chest back to his apartment, saying he'll get rid of it in a week, maybe a few days at most. And now we're 3 months in, as he continues to read Zampano's writings about a tale known as the Novidzin Records, of what he claims to be a film that there's no information on. Many of the sources and citations are made up or completely fabricated. And one of my favorite things about visual storytelling in this book is its use of typography. So you can see here, this is Zampano's writing. And then you can see the font change. This font change down at the bottom here is, oh my gosh, my nails are dirty as shit. The font change down at the bottom here is when Johnny is writing. And I'll try to, of course, provide clarification when that's happening. But anyways, that afternoon, 2 officers arrive, examine the closet, and try to hide the fact that this has to be the weirdest call they have ever made. As Sheriff Axnard says, we'll file a report, but other than that, well, I don't know what we can do. Better, I guess, to have been a victim of a crazy carpenter than some robber, which even strikes Karen and Novidzin as a little funny. With all obvious options exhausted, thank you, Slime, for adding to the... Hey, look at that. Look at that, Slime. Wanda. Oh, yeah, in case y'all are also new here, we do have a printer that you guys can print stuff on. Like the people who printed off the Bee Movie or the Miranda rights back there. But yeah, then you get hung up on the wall. That way... I'm gonna need to do a camera change for this, chat. That way, you know, you can really say that you're hung. All right, back to reading. If you would like to check out, like, if you like the content you're seeing here, feel free to check out our website. It has all of the links to all the things, including our Discord community, which we're having. Oh, do I not have a pedal for that? Thank you, Tuckler. I do have a pedal for that. Wait, I gotta get off of this. Is it? Give me a second, chat. This is such a cool little thing. No, I fucking passed it. Chat, I'm a pro streamer. Chat. There we go. Look at that. Look how fancy that is. Wow. We're so fancy, aren't we? I mean, there you go. I had to make up for it a little bit, chat. Also, totally not doing it just for the dub stream. Did the thing up? I don't know if the goal updated or not. I think it will update at the end of... Hey, chat, quick 5-minute adventure. Why is it not updating? Quick 5-minute adventure, chat. That is such a big monitor. Oh yeah, you're talking about the one like over here. It's a 43-inch monitor or 42-inch, something like that. I got it for $200 on eBay. I was so happy with it because it's normally meant to be like $1,000 because it holds up. It can display 4 computers at once, which is great because I have like 3 mini PCs around there. So if I ever need to do it in multiple displays, I can display it in multiple times. It better fucking update. What do you mean update? Oh, the thing. It will eventually. I'm just trying to see if I can do it a little quicker here. Chat, quick 5-minute adventure. No, don't you do that. I think it goes because it goes off of subscriber points. Because if we did it off of full subscribers, I think that's a bit different. Yeah, so it'll update most likely at the end of stream. Because essentially what subscriber points are is it's like the count of that month. If it doesn't update, we'll figure it out. But yeah, we're not going to scam the 25 here. Twitch shows it. All right, back to the book. While all obvious options exhausted, the visit returns to the building plans. At first, this seems pretty innocent until he gets out a measuring tape. Idly, at first, he starts comparing the dimensions indicated in the plans with those he personally takes. Very soon, he realizes not everything adds up. Something, in fact, is very wrong. The Vision repeatedly tacks back and forth from his 25-foot Stanley power lock to the cold blue pages spread out on his bed. He finally mutters aloud, "This better be a case of bad math." An incoronious cut presents us with the title card, 1/4 inch. Damn, they didn't have to do Navidson that dirty, chat. Shit. Outside the house, Navidson climbs up a ladder to the second story. Not an easy ascent. He casually confesses to us, explaining how the troublesome skin condition he's had since childhood has recently been flared up around his toes. Wincing slightly at what we can assume is at least moderate pain, he reaches up to the top rung using a 100-foot Empire fiberglass tape with a hand crank. He proceeds to measure the distance from the far end of the master bedroom to the far end of the children's bedroom. The total comes out to 32 foot, 9 3/4 inches, which the house plans corroborate, plus or minus an inch. The puzzling part comes when the Navidson measures the internal space. He carefully notes that the length of the new area, the length of the both bedrooms, and then factors in the width of all walls. This results in anything but comforting. In fact, it's impossible. 32 feet, 10 inches exactly. The width of the house inside would appear to exceed the width of the house as measured from the outside by 1/4 of an inch. Certain he had miscalculated, Navidson drills through the outer walls to measure their width more precisely. Navidson, finally, with Karen's help, He fastens to the end some fishing line to the edge of the outer wall, runs it through the drilled hole, and stretches it across through the master bedroom, the new space, the children's bedroom, and then runs it through a hole drilled through the opposite wall. He double checks his work, makes sure the line is straight, level, and taut, and then marks it. The measurement is still the same. 3 foot, 10 inches exactly. Using the same line, Navidson goes outside, stretches the fishing line from one side of the house to the other, only to find it's 1/4 of an inch too long. Exactly. This impossible is one thing when the impossible is one thing when considered as purely intellectual conceit. After all, it is not so large a problem when one can puzzle over an Escher print and then close the book. It is quite another thing when one faces physical reality the mind and body cannot accept. Karen refuses the knowledge. A reluctant Eve who prefers tangerines to apples. I don't care, she tells Navidson. Stop drilling holes in my wall. Undeterred, Navidson continues his quests, even though repeated attempts at measuring the house continue to reveal the 1/4 inch anomaly. Karen gets quieter and quieter. Navidson's mood darkens, and responding like lightly tuned weather vanes, the children react to the change in parental weather by hiding in other parts of the house. Frustration edges into Navidson's voice. No matter how hard he tries, and Navidson tries 6 consecutive times in 6 consecutive segments, he cannot slaughter that tiny sliver of space. Another night passes, and the 1/4 inch still survives. Where narratives in film and fiction often rely on virtually imminent reactions, reality is far more insistent, infinitely literally more patient. Just as insidious poison in the water table can take years before the effects are felt, the consequences of the impossible are likewise not so instantly apparent. Morning means orange juice. Morning means orange juice. The New York Times, NPR, a squabble over the children's rights to eat sugared cereal. The dishwasher moans, the toaster pops. We watch Karen scan the classifieds as Navidson toys with his coffee. He adds sugar, milk, stirs it up, stirs it again, and then as an afterthought adds more sugar, a little more milk. The liquid rises to the rim and then by a fraction exceeds even his limit. It does not spill. It holds, a bulge of coffee arching tragically over China, preserved by the physics of surface tension, rhymed to some unspeakable magic, though as everyone knows, coffee miracles never last long. The morning wake-up call wobbles, splits, and then abruptly spills over the edge, now a Nile of caffeine, winding past glass and politics until there is more than a brown blot on the morning paper. When Navidson looks up, Karen is watching him. I called Tom, he tells her. She understands him well enough to not say anything. He knows I'm insane, he continues, and besides, he builds houses for a living. Did you talk to him? She asked carefully. Left a message. The next card simply reads Tom. Tom is Will Navidson's fraternal twin brother. Neither one has said much to each other in over 8 years. Navi's successful, Tom's not, Karen explains in the film. There has been a lot of resentment over the years. I guess it's always been there, except when they lived at home. It was different then. They kind of looked after each other more. 2 days later, Tom arrives. Karen greets him with a big hug and a high 8. He is affable, overweight giant man who has an innate ability to amuse. The children immediately take to him. They love his laugh, not to mention his McDonald's french fries. My brother, who I haven't talked to in years, calls me up at 4 a.m. and tells me he needs my tools. Go figure. That means your family, Karen says happily, leading the way to Navidson's study, where she has already set out clean towels and made up the hallway. Back to Johnny's account. Easily that whole bit, coffee arching tragically down the morning paper, could have been cut. You wouldn't have noticed his absence. I probably wouldn't have either. But that doesn't change the fact that I can't do it. Get rid of it, I mean. What's gained in economy doesn't really seem to make up for what you lose of Zampano. The old man himself coming a little more into focus, especially where digressions like these are concerned. I can't tell exactly why. I can't tell you exactly. I can't tell you why exactly, but more and more these days, I'm struck by the fact that everything Zampano had is really gone, including the bowl of betel nuts left under his mantle or the battered shotgun bearing the initials of RLB under his bed. Flays appropriated that goodie. That goodie. The shotgun, not the bed, or even the curiously preserved bud of white roses hidden in the drawer of his nightstand. By now, his apartment has been scrubbed with Clorox, repainted, probably rented out to someone else. His body's either molding in the ground or reduced to ash. Nothing else remains of him but this. So you see my perspective. Having to decide between Old Man Z and his story is an artificial, maybe even dangerous choice, and one I'm obviously not comfortable making. The way I figure it, if there's something you find irksome, go ahead and skip it. I couldn't care less how you read any of this. His wandering passages are staying, along with all his oddly canted phrases and even some of the warped bits in the plot. There's just too much at stake. It may be the wrong decision, but fuck it, it's mine. Zampano himself probably would have insisted on corrections and edits. He was his own harshest critic, but I've come to believe errors, especially written errors, are often the only markers left by a solitary life. To sacrifice them is to lose angles of personality, the riddle of a soul, in this case a very old soul, a very old riddle. Back to Zampano. Usually when you want a level, you ask a neighbor or go to the hardware store. Count on Will Novidzin to call Lowell, Massachusetts. Where is he? As it turns out, Novidzin has gone to the hardware store to pick up a few items. In the film, Tom and Novidzin first encounter has almost nothing to do with each other. Instead of addressing any interpersonal issues, we find them huddled over a Cali-level mirror transit, alternatively talking turns peering across the house. Alternately taking turns peering across the house, the line of sight floating a few feet above the chase race around the children's beds. Tom believes they will account for a quarter-inch discrepancy with perfectly level measurement. Later on, out in the backyard, Tom lights up a joint of marijuana. The drug clearly bothers Novidzin, but he says nothing. Tom knows his brother disapproves, but refuses to alter his behavior. Based on their body language and the way both of them avoid looking at each other directly, not to speak of the space between their words, the last 8 years continues to haunt them. Hey, at least I'm an acquaintance of Bill's now, Tom finally says, exhaling a thin stream of smoke. Not a drop of booze in over 2 years. At first glance, it seems hard to believe these two men are even related, let alone brothers. Tom is content if there happens to be a game on and a soft place for which to watch it. Novidzin works out every day, devours volumes of esoteric criticism, and constantly attaches the world around him to one thing: photography. Tom gets by, Novidzin succeeds. Tom just wants to be, Novidzin must become. And yet, despite such obvious differences, anyone who looks past Tom's wide grin and considers his eyes will find surprisingly deep pools of sorrow, which is how we know they are brothers, because like Tom, Novidzin's eyes share the same water. Either way, the moment and opportunity for some kind of fraternal healing disappears when Tom makes an important discovery. Novidzin was wrong. The interior of the house exceeds the exterior not by 1/4 of an inch, but by 5/16 of an inch. No matter how many legal pads, napkins, or newspaper margins they fill with notes or equations, they cannot account for that fraction. One incontrivable fact stands in their way. The exterior measurements must equal the interior measurements. Physics depends on a universe infinitely centered on an equal sign. As science writer and sometimes theologian David Cont wrote, God, for all intents and purposes, is an equal sign, and at least up until now, something humanity has always been able to believe in is that the universe adds up. On this point, both brothers agree. The problem must lie with their measuring techniques, or with some unseen mitigating factor: air temperature, miscalibrated instruments, warped floors, something, anything. But after a day and a half passes without a solution, they both decide to look for help. Tom calls Lowell and postpones his construction obligations. Nivizen calls an old friend who teaches engineering at UVA. Early the following morning, both brothers head off for Charlottesville. Nivizen is not the only one who knows people in the vicinity. Karen's friend Audrey McCollin drives down from Washington, D.C. to catch up and help construct some bookshelves. Thus, as Will and Tom set out to find an answer, two old friends put an enigma on hold to stir up some vodka tonic and enjoy the rhyme of working with brackets and pine. Edith Scourgia has written an impressive 40-page essays entitled Riddles Without on this one episode. While most of it focuses on what Scourgia refers to as the political posture of both women, Karen as an ex-model, Audrey as a travel agent, one particular passage yields an elegant perspective into whys and ways people confront unanswered questions. Riddles. They either delight or torment. Their delight lies in solutions. Answers provide bright moments of comprehension, perfectly suited for children who still inhabit a world where solutions are readily available. Implicit in the riddle's form is a promise, and the rest of the world resolves just as easily. And so riddles comfort the children's mind, which spins wildly before the onslaught of so much information and so many subsequent questions. The adult world, however, produces riddles of a different variety. They do not have answers and are often called enigmas or paradoxes. Still, the old hint of a riddle's form corrupts these questions by re-echoing the fundamental lesson: there must be an answer. From there comes torment. It is not uncharacteristic to encounter adults who detest riddles. A variety of reasons may lie behind their reaction, but significant one is the rejection of adolescent belief in answers. These adults are often the same ones who say grow up or face the facts. They are offended by the incongruities of yesterday's riddles with answers when compared to today's riddles without. We're going to pause for a second as the ad runs, chat. I'm going to quickly go grab some water, so we will be right back. Alrighty. I have some water now so I can actually continue to read. It's beneficial to consider the origins of riddle. The Old English radzel means opinion, conjure, which is related to the Old English redon, to interpret. In the beginning, in turn, belonging to the same etymologic history of read. Riddling is an offshoot of reading, calling to mind that participatory nature of the act, to interpret which is all of the adult world has left when faced with the unsolvable. To read actually comes from the Latin rere, to calculate, to think, which is not the progenitor of read, but of reason, as well, both of which hail from the Greek akreisen, to fit. Aside from giving us a reason, akreisen also gives us the unlikely sibling Latin arma, which means weapons. It seems that to fit the world or make sense of it requires either reason or arms. Charmingly enough, Karen Green and Audrey McCullen fit it with a bookshelf. As we all know, both reason and weapons will eventually be resorted to, at least though for now, before the explorations, before the bloodshed, a drill and a hammer, and a Phillips screwdriver suffice. Karen refers to her book as newly found day-to-day comfort. By assembling a strong hold for them, she provides a pleasant balance between the known and the unknown. Here stands one warm, solid, and colorful wall of volume after the volume of history, poetry, photo albums, and pulp. And though irony eventually surmises this moment, for now at least it remains uncommented upon and thus wholly innocent. Karen simply removes the photo album, as anyone might do, and causes all the books to fall like dominoes along the top shelf. However, instead of tumbling to the floor, they are soundly stopped, eliciting a smile from both women, profoundly remarked by Karen. No better bookends than two walls. Lessons from a library. Scourge's analysis, especially concerning the inherent innocence of Karen's project, sheds some light on the value of patience. Walter Joseph Adeline argues that Scourge forms a dishonest partnership with the shelf-building segment. Riddle me this, riddle me that is all elegant crap. This is not a confrontation with the unknown, but a flat-out case of denial. What Adotine himself denies is the need to face some problems with patience, to wait instead of bumble, or as Totsley wrote, dans let doute mon cher absintoi, which translates to... oh, come on. Something like, when in doubt, friend, do nothing. War and Peace by Leo Totsley, 1982, Penguin Classics in New York, P885. Right. Gibsons, when working on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, would go on long walks before sitting down to write. Walking was a time to organize his thoughts, focus, and relax. Karen's shelf building serves the same purpose as Gibson's retreats outside. Maturity, one discovers, has everything to do with acceptance of not knowing. Of course, not knowing hardly prevents the approaching chaos. Tum voro omne mihi visium concede in Inglis illum delanda est Cathco. Know what? Latin's way out of my league. I can find people who speak Spanish, French, Hebrew, Italian, and German, but Roman tongues are not exactly thriving in the streets of LA. This is Johnny. A girl named Amber Rideacre suggested it might have something to do with the destruction of Carthage. She's the one who translated and sourced the previous Tolsky phrase. I've never actually read War and Peace, but she had, and get this, she read it to Zampano. I guess you might say in a roundabout way, the old man introduced us. Anyway, since that episode in the tattoo shop, I haven't gotten out as much. Though, to tell you the truth, I'm no longer convinced anything happened. I keep cornering myself with questions. Did I really experience some sort of decapitating seizure? Or did I invent it? Maybe I just got a little creative with the residual hangover or a stupid head rush. Whatever the truth is, I've been spending more and more time riddling through Zampano's bits. Riddling also means sifting, as in passing corn, gravel, or cinders through coarse sieve. A certain co-ed taught me that. Not only have I found journals packed with bibliographies and snaking etymologies and strange little, I don't know, what do you call them? Aphormesias, epiphanies. I also came across this notepad crammed with names and telephone numbers. Zampano's readers. Easily over 100 of them, though I quickly discover more than a few of the numbers are now defunct, and a very few of the names have last names, and for whatever reason, those that do are unlisted. I left a couple of messages on some machines, and then somewhere on page 3, Miss Write-A-Care picked up. I told her about my inheritance, and she immediately agreed to meet me for a drink. Amber, it turns out, was quite a number, a quarter French and quarter Native American with naturally black hair, dark blue eyes, and a beautiful belly, long and flat and thin, with a slender twine of silver piercing her navel, a barbed wire tattoo in blue and red encircling her ankle. Whether Zampano knew it or not, she was a sight I'm sure he was sorry to miss. He loved to brag about how uncertain he was, Amber told me. Or how uneducated he was, Amber told me. I never even went to high school, he would say. Good, that makes me smarter than you. We talked like that a little, but most of the time I just read to him. He insisted on Tolstoy. Say, I read Tolstoy better than anyone else. I think that was mainly because I could manage the French passages okay, my Canadian background and all that. After a few more drinks, we ambled over to the Viper. Lude was hanging out at the door and walked us in. Much to the surprise, Amber grabbed my arm and we were headed upstairs. The thing we shared in common seemed to create a surprisingly intense bond. Lude listened to us for a while, hastening to add at every pause that he was the one who found the damn thing, and in fact, the one who called me. He'd even seen Amber around his building a few times, but because he hadn't taken the time to read any of the text, he could never address the particulars of our conversations. Amber and I were lost to a different world, a deeper history. Lude knew the play. He ordered a drink on my tab, and we went in search of other entertainment. When I eventually got around to asking Amber to describe Zampano, she just called him imperceivable and alone, though I think so lonely. Then the first band came on, and we stopped talking. Afterwards, Amber was the one who resumed the conversation, stepping a little closer, her elbow grazing mine. I never got the idea he had a family, she continued. I asked him once, and I remember this very clearly. I asked him if he had any children. He said he didn't have any children anymore. Then he added, "Of course, you're all my children," which was strange since I was the only one there. But the way he looked at me, with those blank eyes, she shuddered and quickly folded her arms as if she had just gotten cold. It was like this tiny piece of him was suddenly full of faces, and he could see all of them and even speak to them. It makes me real uneasy, like I'm surrounded by ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts? I told her I don't know. She smiled. I'm a Virgo. What about you? We ordered another round of drinks. The next band came up, but we didn't stay to hear them finish. As we walked to her place, it turned out she lived nearby, right above Sunset Plaza, in fact. She kept returning to the old man, a trace of her own obsession mingling with the drifts of her thoughts. So not so lonely, she murmured. I mean, with all those ghosts, me and his other children, whoever they were, though actually, I forgot about this. I don't know why. I mean, it was why I stopped going there. When he blinked, his eyelids, this is kind of weird, but they stayed closed for a little bit longer than a blink. Like he was consciously closing them or about to sleep. I always wondered for a fraction of a second if they would ever open again. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe he was going to sleep or maybe even die, and looking at his face then, so sincere and peaceful, made me sad. And I guess I take back whatever I said before, because his eyes closed, with his eyes closed, he didn't look alone. He looked lonely, terribly lonely, and that made me feel really sad, and it made me feel lonely too. I stopped going there after a while, but you know what? Not visiting him made me feel kind of guilty. I still feel kind of guilty just dropping him like that. We stopped talking about Zampano then. She paged her friend Christina, who took less than 20 minutes to come over, and there were no introductions. We just sat down on the floor and snorted lines of coke off a CD case and gulped down a bottle of wine and then used it to play spin the bottle. They kissed each other first, then they both kissed me, and then we forgot about this bottle, and I even managed to forget about Zampano. About how much that attack in the tattoo shop had put me on edge. 2 kisses in 1 kiss was all it took. A comfort, a warmth, perhaps temporary, perhaps false, but reassuring nonetheless. And mine and theirs, all 3 of us giggling, insane giggles and laughters with still more kisses on the way. And I remembered a brief instant then, out of the blue, when I suddenly glimpsed my own father, a rare but oddly peaceful recollection, as if he actually approved of my play in the way he himself had always laughed and played, always laughing, surrendering to its ease, especially when he soared in great updrafts of light, burning off distant plateaus of bistry and sage, throwing him up like an angel high above the red earth, deep into the sparkling blank. The tender sky that never once let him down, preserving his attachment to youth, propriety, and kindness, his plain almost, but never quite outracing his whoops of joy, trailing him in his sudden turn to the wind, followed by a near vertical climb to the angles of the sun, and I was barely 8, and still with him, and yes, that was the thought that flickered madly through me, a brief instant of communion, possessing me and with warmth and ageless ease, causing me to smile again and relax as if the memory alone could lift my heart, like the winds lifting a wing. And so I renewed my kisses with even greater enthusiasm, caressing and in turn devouring their dark lips, dark with wine and fleeting love, an ancient memory love had promised but finally never gave, until there were too many kisses to count or remember, and the memory of love proved not love at all, and needed a replacement, which our bodies found. And then the giggles subsided, and the laughter dimmed, and the darkness enfolded all of us, and we gave away our childhood for nothing, and we died, and condoms littered the floor, and Karen's project, and Christina threw up in the sink, and Amber chuckled a little bit and kissed me more, but in a way that told me it was time to leave. And so now, days later, as I give these moments shape here, do I recount what highly briefly withheld, the covering memory permanently hitched to everything preceding it was so prohibiting all of it. Those memories, the good ones, no matter how different, how blissful, eclipsed by jackknife trailer across the highway, the billowing up into the night and hardly deterred by the pinprick drizzle, the fire itself crawling up from the punctured fuel tanks, stripping the paint, melting the tires, blackening the shattered glass, the windshield struck from within, each jagged line telling the story of a broken heart, which no 10-year-old boy should ever have to recollect, let alone even if it is in half-tone. The ink, all of it, over and over again, finally gathered on his delicate fingertips, and as if by tracing the picture printed in the newspaper he could in some way retract the details of death, smooth away the cab where the man he saw and loved like a god agonized and died with no word of his own, illegible or otherwise, no god at all. So by dissolving the black sky, bringing back the blue. But he never did. He only wore through one newspaper after another, which was when the officials responsible for the custody of parentless children decided something was gravely wrong with him and sent him away, making sure he had no more clippings, and all the ink, all that remained of his father, was washed from his hands. Dang. I need a sip of water. Back to Zampano. Karen's project is one mechanism against the uncanny, or that which is unhomelike. She remains watchful and willing to listen to the bizarre dimensions of her house gestate with her. She challenges its irregularity by introducing normalcy, her friend's presence, bookshelves, peaceful conversation. In this respect, Karen acts as a quintessential gatherer. She keeps close to the homestead, and while she may not forage for berries and mushrooms, she does accumulate tiny bits of sense. Davidson and Tom, on the other hand, are classic hunters. They select weapons, tools, reason, and they track their prey, a solution. Billy Ralston is one they hope will help them achieve their goal. He is a gruff man, frequently caustic and more like a drill sergeant than a tenured professor. He is a paraplegic who has spent almost half of his life in an aluminium wheelchair. Davidson was barely 27 when he first met Reston. Actually, it was a photograph that brought them together. Davidson had been on assignment in India, taking pictures of trains, rail workers, engineers, whatever caused attention. They were supposed to capture the clamor of the industry outside Hyderabad. What ended up plastered on the pages of more than a few newspapers, however, was a photograph of a black American engineer desperately trying to outrun a falling high-voltage wire. The cable had been cut when an inexperienced crane operator had swung wide of a freight car and accidentally collided with an electrical pole. The wood instantly splintered, tearing in half one of the power cables, which descended into the helpless Billy Reston, spitting sparks and lashing the air like Nag or Nagina. Nag or Nagina were the names of the two cobras in Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. Eventually, both were defeated by the mongoose Rikki Tikki Tavi. That very photograph hangs on Reston's office wall. It captures the moments of fear, or the mixture of fear and disbelief in Reston's face as he suddenly finds himself running for his life. One moment he was casually scanning the yard, thinking about lunch, and in the next, he was about to die. His stride is stretched, back toes trying to push him out of the way. Hands are reaching for something, anything to pull him out of the way, but he is too late. That serpentine shape surrounds him, moving much too fast for any last-ditch effort of escape. As Fred de Stabbernth remarks in April 1954, Les jux sont faits, nos sommes fucked. I'm sorry, wait. Fred de Stabbernth reportedly exclaimed that right before he was part missing. And let me illustrate the part missing, chat. Part missing, chat. Tom takes a hard look at this remarkable 11 by 14 black and white print. That was the last time I had legs, Reston tells him, right before that ugly snake bit him off. I used to hate that picture, and then I sort of became grateful for it. Now, whenever anyone walks into my office, they don't think about asking me how I ended up here in this chariot. They can see for themselves. Thank you, Navy, you bastard. Rikki Tikki Tavi with a Nikon. Eventually, the chat subsides, and the three men get down to business. Reston's response is simple, rational, and exactly what the brothers came to hear. There is no question the problems with your equipment. I'd have to check out Tom's stuff myself, but I'm willing to bet the university money there's something a little out of whack with it. I've gotten a few things you can borrow. A Stanley beacon level and a laser distance meter. He grins at Davidson. The meter's even a Lakeisha. That should put this ghost in the grave fast. But if it doesn't, I'll come out and measure your place myself, and I'll charge you for my time too. Both Will and Tom chuckle, perhaps being a little foolish. Reston shakes his head. If you ask me, Navy, you got a little too much time on your hands. You'd probably be better off if you just took your family for a nice long drive. On their way back, Davidson points his high 8 towards the darkening horizon. For a while, neither brothers say a word. Will breaks the first silence. Funny how all it took was a fraction of an inch to get us in a car together. Pretty strange. Thanks for coming, Tom. Like there was ever really a chance I'd say no. A pause. Again, Davidson speaks up. I almost wonder if I got tangled up in all this measuring stuff just to have some pretext to call you. Despite his best efforts, Tom cannot hold back a laugh. You know, I hate to tell you, but there's simpler reasons you could come up with. You're telling me, Davidson says, shaking his head. Rain starts splashing down the windshield and lightning cracks across the sky. Another pause follows. This time, Tom breaks the silence. Did you hear that one about the guy on the tightrope? Davidson grins. I'm glad some things never change. Hey, this one's true. There's a 25-year-old guy walking on a tightrope across a deep river gorge, while halfway around the world, Another 25-year-old guy was getting a blowjob from a 70-year-old woman. But get this, at the exact same moment, both men were thinking the exact same thought. You know what it was? No clue. Tom gives his brother a wink. Don't look down. Gosh dang it. And thus, as one storm begins to ravage the Virginians, another one just as easily dissipates and vanishes in a flood of bad jokes and old stories. When confronting the spatial disparity in the house, Karen set her mind on familiar things, while Novitzin went in search of the solution. The children, however, just accepted it. They raced through the closet. They played in it. They inhabited it. They denied up the paradox by swallowing it whole. Paradox, after all, is two irreconcilable truths. Oh my gosh. But children do not know the laws of the world well enough yet to fear the ramifications of the irreconcilable. There are certainly no primal associations with spatial anonymities. Similar to the ingenious opening sequence of the Novitzin record, seeing the two giddy children romp around is an equally unsettling experience, perhaps because of the state of their naivety is so appealing to us, even seductive, offering such a simple resolution to an enigma. Unfortunately, denial also means ignoring the possibility of peril. The possibility, however, seems at least momentarily irrelevant when we cut to Will and Tom hauling Billy Reston's equipment upstairs, the authority of their tools quickly subsiding any sense of threat. Just watching the two brothers use the Stanley Beacon leveler to establish the distance they need to measure communicates comfort. When they turn their attention to the Alicia meter, it is nearly impossible not to at last expect some kind of resolution to this confounding problem. In fact, Tom's crossed fingers as the Class 2 laser fires up a tiny red dot across the width of the house manages to succinctly represent our own sympathies. As a result are not immediate, we wait, along with the whole family, as the internal computer calibrates the dimensions. Novitzin captures these seconds in 16mm film. His Aeroflex, already pre-focused and left running, spools in 24 frames a second as Daisy and Chad sit in their beds in the background. Hillary and Mallory linger in the foreground near Tom, while Karen and Audrey stand off right near the newly completed bookshelves. Suddenly, Novitzin lets out a hoot. It appears the discrepancy has been eliminated. Tom peers over his shoulder. Goodbye, Mr. Fraction. One more time, Novitzin says. One more time just to make sure. Oddly enough, a slight draft keeps easing one of the closet doors shut. It's an eerie effect because each time the closet door closes, we lose sight of the children. Hey, would you mind propping something open with that? Novitzin asks his brother. Tom turns to Karen's shelves and reaches for the largest volume he can find, a novel. Just as with Karen, its removal causes an immediate domino effect. Only this time, the books topple into each other. The last few do not stop at the wall as they previously had done, but instead fall to the floor, revealing at least a foot between the end of the shelf and the plaster. Tom thinks nothing of it. Sorry, he mumbles as he leans over to pick up the scattered books, which is exactly when Karen screams. Okay, chat, I think we'll do one more chapter today. Let me see, how long is this chapter? I think it's manageable. I mean, it actually is a really long chapter, but we might take a break in between the chapter, but we'll figure it out, chat. Raju welcomed the intrusion, something to relieve the loneliness of the place. R.K. Narian? It's impossible to appreciate the importance of significance in the Novitzin record without first taking into account the significance of echoes. However, before even beginning a cursory examination of their literal and thematic presence in the film, echoes reverberating with the word itself needs to be distinguished. Generally speaking, echo has two coextensive histories, the mythological one and the scientific one. Each provides a slightly different perspective on the inherent meaning of reassurance, especially when that repetition is imperfect. To illustrate the multiple resonances found in an echo, the Greeks conjured up stories of a beautiful mountain nymph. Her name was Echo, and she made the mistake of helping Zeus succeed in one of his sexual conquests. Hera found out and punished Echo, making it impossible for her to say anything except the last words ever spoken to her. Soon after, Echo fell in love with Narcissus, whose obsession with himself caused her to pine away until only her voice remained. Another lesser-known version of this myth has Pan falling in love with Echo. Echo, however, rejects his amorous offers, and Pan, being the god of civility and restraint, tears her into Pisces. Burying all of her except her voice. Adonte Mel. In both cases, unfulfilled love results in total negation of Echo's body and the near negation of her voice. But Echo is an insurgent. Despite the divine constraints imposed upon her, she still manages to subvert the god's ruling. After all, her reputations are far from digital, much closer to analog. Echo colors the words with faint traces of sorrow, the Narcissus myth, or accusations, the Pan myth, never present in the original, as Ovid recognized in his Metamorphosis. Adonta, her still singing limbs, was the translation. Note that lucky in this chapter, Zampano penciled in many of the translations for the Greek and Latin quotations into the margins. I've gone ahead and turned them into these footnotes. Thank you, Johnny. I'm not reading that. It is Greek. I'm not going to try to read the Greek. Let's go ahead and read the... Is that... Wait, did I skip a page? Oh, no, this is part from the Metamorphosis, right? Eloquently translated by Horace Gregory. So she was turned away, to hide her face, her lips, her guilt among the trees, even their leaves, to haunt the caves of forest, to feed her love on melancholy sorrow, which sleepless turned her body to a shade. First pale and wrinkled, then a sheet of air, then bones which some stay turned into thin, worn rocks. At last her voice remained, vanished in forest, far from her usual walks in the hill and valleys. She's heard by all. Oh, there's an ad break. We'll give it a second for the ad break, chat. Oh, man. Oh, I can put on some music, too, as the ad runs, chat. No, we're not, like, sitting in silence. That was so loud. I'm sorry. Oh, my gosh. That blew my ears out, too. Oh. Oh, the song fits so well with the story, chat. Perfect. I'm losing my mind. Alrighty, welcome back from the ads, chat. We will continue. First pale and wrinkled, then a sheet of air, then bones which say some turned to thin, worn rocks, and last her voice remained, vanished in the forest, far from her usual walks and valleys. She's heard by all who call her. Her voice has life. The Metamorphosis by Ovid. To repeat, her voice has life. It possesses a quality that not present in the original, revealing how a nymph can return a different and more meaningful story in spite of telling the same story. Literary marvel Miguel de Cervantes set down this compelling passage in his Don Cont, Part 9. I can't read those passages, chat. Those are in French, I think. Exactly. How the fuck do you write about exquisite variation when both patches are exactly the same? Oh, they're literally the exact same, chat. Oh, chat, they're literally. Read the French. All right. La verdad que madre. No, is this Spanish? Um, La verdad que madre es la historia Emilia de tiempo despito de los asinos, testigo de lo pasado en Ejalimpo, hay aviso de lo presente, advocaria de lo porvenir. Is this Spanish or Latin? Much later, yet untired disciple of arms had the rare pleasure of meeting the extraordinary Pierce Menard in Paris Cafe following their second war. Reportedly, Menard expounded on his distinct distaste for Madeleines, but never mentioned the passage An Echo of Don Quixote he had penned before the war, which had subsequently earned him the fair amount of literary fame. And it repeats, La verdad cuya madres es la historia himno del tiempo despito das las años testigo de lo pasado ejemplo. Shoot, I don't know how to pronounce Spanish, just. Hay aviso de lo presente adverticia de lo porvenir. The exquisite variation on this passage by the ingenious layman is too far dense to unpack here. Suffice it to say, Menard's nuances are so fine that they are nearly undetectable through talk with the framer, and you will talk with the framer, and you will immediately see how haunted they are by sorrow, accusation, and sarcasm. Exactly. How the fuck did you write about exquisite variation when both passages are the exact same? I'm sure the late hour has helped. Add to that the dim light in my room. This is Johnny, by the way. Add to that the dim light in my room, or how poorly I've been sleeping, going to sleep, but not really resting, if that's possible. Though, let me tell you, sitting alone, awake to nothing else but this odd murmuring, listening to the penitent prayer, you know it's a prayer because you miss the words, or better yet, listening to the bitter curse, realizing the whole world's wrong, being ushered into the world, but still missing the words. Me like that written out on the brown leaves of paper. Or no, that's not right. Not brown, more like, oh, I don't know. Yes, brown, but in a failing light, appearing almost colored or the memory of color. Somehow violent or close to that, or not at all, as I just kept reading both pieces over and over again, trying to detect at least one differing accent or letter, wanting to detect at least one different accent or letter, greeting. Oh, it repeats. I thought I did that. No. Or greeting among the desperate in that pursuit, only to repeatedly discover perfect similitude. Though how can that be, right? If it was perfect, it wouldn't be similar. It would be identical. And you know what? I've lost this sentence. I can't even finish it. Don't know how. Here's my point. The more I focused in on the words, the further I seemed from my room. No sense where either. Until all of a sudden, along the edges of my tongue, towards the back of my mouth, I started to taste something extremely bitter, almost metallic. I began to gag. I didn't gag, but I was certain I would. Then I got a whiff of that same awful I detected outside of the shop in the hall. Faint as hell at first, until I knew I'd smelled it, and then it wasn't faint at all. The whole lot of rot was suddenly packaged up my nose, slowly creeping down my throat. I'm going to sit up for a second here, chat. Slowly creeping down my throat. Where was I? Wait. Let me see. Slowly. Ooh.
I am losing my position here, chat. Okay, let me see here. I think I looked at that same whole lot of rot. Slowly creeping down my throat, closing it off. I started to throw up. Watery chunks of vomit flying everywhere, sluicing out me onto the floor, splashing onto the wall, even onto this, except I only coughed. I didn't cough. I lightly cleared my throat, and then the smell was gone, and so was the taste. I was back in my room again, looking around in the dim light, jittery,
distorted, but hardly fooled. I put the fragments back in the trunk, walked the perimeter of my room, glass of bourbon, a toke on a blunt. There we go. Bring on the haze. But who am I kidding? I can still see what's happening. My line of defense has not only failed, it's failed long ago. Don't ask me to define the line either, or why exactly needed, or even what it stands in defense against. I haven't the foggiest idea. This much, though, I'm sure of. I'm not alone in hostile territories with no clue why they're hostile or how to get back into safe havens. An old haven, a lost haven, the temperature dropping, the hour heaving and pitching towards profound darkness. While before my idiotic, amoric guide laughs. Actually cackles is more like it, lost in his own litany of inside jokes, completely out of his head, out of focus too. Zonules of Zen, among other things, having snapped long ago like piano wires, leaving me absolutely no sound way to determine where the hell I'm supposed to be, where the hell I'm going, though right now to hell seems like a pretty sound bet. Back to Zampano. In his own befuddled way, John Hollander has given the world a beautiful and strange reflection on love and longing. To read his marvelous dialogue on Echo is to find its author standing perfectly still in the middle of a sidewalk, eyes wild with a cascade of internal reckonings, lips acting out some unintelligible discourse, inaudible to the numerous students who were racing by him, nodding his mad appearance and quiet rightly offering him a wide berth as they escape into someone else's class. Hollander begins with a visual catalog of literal echoes. For example, the Latin, decim iam annos atium trivia in Syrio, echoed by the Greek one, or musam studia, Latin, described by the echo dia, or Narcissus, rejection, amor quam sit tiba copia. I have spent 10 years on Cicero's ass. The Muses studies divine ones, is the translation. To which Echo responds, sit tibi copia nostri, which is, may I die before I give you power over me, Narcissus. I give you power over me, Echo. On page 4, he provides a woodcut from Anthony Kirsch's Neue Hall und Zunft, Nordengland, 1684, illustrating an artificial echo machine designed to exchange clamor for 4 echoes, a more, or, and finally re. Nor does Hollander stop there. His slim volume abounds with examples of textual transfiguration, though in an effort to keep repeating the entire book, let this heart-wrenching interchange serve as my final example. Si dara fine al gran lore. Who will put an end to this great sadness, the hours passing? While the figures of Echoes take special delight in clever word games, Hollander knows better than to limit his examination there. Echo may live in metaphors, puns, and the suffix solus ex illo visit in altris, or literary rocky caves, but her range extends far beyond those literal walls. For instance, the rabbinical bat kol means daughter of voice, which in a modern Hebrew serves as a rough equivalent for the word echo. Milton knew it. God so commanded and left that command, sole daughter of his voice. So did Wordsworth, stern daughter of the voice of God, quoting Henry Reynolds' Mythomestes. Hollander evidences religious appropriation of the ancient myth echo. This, Wendy, is, as the before-mentioned Imbalus by Constant of his other fellow Kabbalists says, the symbol of the breath of God, and echo of the reflection of the divine breath or spirit upon us, as they interpreted, the daughter of divine voice, which through the beatifying splendor it sheds and diffuses through the soul. It's just worthy to be reverenced and adored by us. This echo descending upon a Narcissus or such a soul as impurely and virtuously affected slights and stops his ears to the divine voice, or shuts his heart from the divine inspirations, though his being enamored of not himself, but his own shadow merely. He becomes thence an earthly weak, worthless thing, and fit sacrifice for only eternal oblivion. Thus Echo suddenly assumes the role of a god's messenger, the female Mercury, or perhaps Prometheus, decked in Thalia with a lamp in hand, descending on fortune humanity. In 1984, however, the noted Southern theologian Hanson Edwin Rose dramatically revised this reading in a series of lectures delivered at Chapel Hill. Rose referred to God's grand utterance as the biggest bang of them all. After discussing in depth the difference between the Hebrew davar and the Greek logos, Rose took a careful accounting of St. John chapter 1 verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was a virtuous performance, but one that surely would have been relegated to those dusty shelves already burdened with thousands-year-old seminary discourse, had he not summed up his ruminations with this incendiary and still infamous conclusions. Look to the sky, look to yourself, and remember, we are only God's echoes, and God is Narcissus. Rose's pronouncement recalls another equally important meditation. Why did God create a dual universe? So he might say, be not like me, I am alone, and I might be heard. There is not time or room to adequately address the complexity inherent in this passage, aside from noting how the voice is returned, or figuratively echoed, not with an actual word, but with a mere understanding that it was received, listened to, or as the text explicitly states, heard. What the passage occludes, no doubt, on purpose, is how such an understanding might be attained. Interestingly enough, for all of its marvelous observations, the figure of echo contains a startling error, one of which performs a poetic modulation on the voice sounded over a century ago. While discussing Wordsworth's poem, The Power of Sound, Hollander quotes on page 19 the following few lines. Ye voices and ye shadows, and images of voice, to hound and horn, from rocky steep and rocky bestad meadows, flung back and in the sky's blue care reborn. Italics added for emphasis. Perhaps it's simply a typographical error commented by the publisher, or perhaps the publisher was dutifully transcribing an error commented by Hollander himself. Not just the scholar, but a poet as well, who is in a tiny slip where an R replaced a V and an S miraculously vanished, his own relation to a meaning of echo, a meaning Wordsworth did not share, considering the original text. Fancy. Ye voices and shadows and images of voice, to hound and horn, from rocky steep and rock bestreaded meadows, flung back and in the sky, blue caves reborn. While Wordsworth poetics retained the literal properties and stayed within the canonical jurisdiction of echo, Hollander finds something else not exactly religious. That would be a hyperbole, but compassionate, which as an echo of humanity suggests the profound return of all. Aside from the reoccurrence, revision, and commensurate symbolic reference, echoes also reveal emptiness. Since objects always muffle or impede acoustic reflection, only empty places can create an echo of lasting clarity. Ironically, hollowness only increases the eerie quality of the otherness inherent in any echo. Delayed and fragmented repetition create a sense of another inhabiting. Delayed and fragmented repetition create the sense of another inhabiting a necessarily deserted place. Strange then how Something so uncanny and out of the self, even ghostly as some have suggested, can at the time also contain a resilient comfort, the assurance that even if it is imaginary and at best the product of a wall, there is something else out there, something to stake out in the face of nothingness. Hollander is wrong when he writes on page 55. The apparent echoing of solitary words reminds us that acoustical echoing in empty places can be a very common auditory emblem. Redolent of Gothic novels as it may be, of insulation and often unwilling solitude, there is no doubt a case of nature echoes conforming to echoes mythographic mocking, rather than affirming role. In an empty hall that should be comfortably inhabited, echoes of our voice and motions mock our very presence in the hollow space. It is not by accident that choirs singing psalms are always recorded with ample reverb. Divinity seems defined by echo, whether the Vienna boys' choir or monks chanting away on some chart climbing CD. The hollowed always seems to abide in the province of the hollow. The reason for this is not too complicated. An echo, while implying an enormity of space, at the same time also defines it, limits it, and even temporarily inhabits it. When a pebble falls down in a well, it is gratifying to hear the eventual plunk. However, if the pebble only slips into the darkness and vanishes without a sound, in the case of a verbal echo, the spoken word acts as the pebble, and the subsequent repetitions serves as the plunk. In this way, speaking can result in a form of seeing. For all merits, Hollander's book only devotes 5 pages to the actual physics of sound. While this is not a place to dwell on the beautiful and complex properties of reflection in order to even dimly comprehend the shape of Navidson's house, it is still critical how the laws of physics and in tandem with echo's mythic inheritance serve to enhance echo's interpretive strength. The descriptive ability of the audible is it's easily designated with the following formula. It is sound plus time equals acoustic light. As most people know who are versed in this century's technological effects, exact distances can be determined by timing the duration of a sound's round trip between the deflecting objects and its point of origin. This principle serves as the basis for all of the radar, sonar, and ultrasonics used every day around the world by air traffic controllers, fishermen, and obstetricians. By using sound or electromagnetic waves, visible blips may be produced on a screen indicating either a 747, a school of salmon, or a barely pumping heart of a fetus. Of course, echolocation has never belonged exclusively to technology. Micropeda, or bats, or cetacean porpoises and toothed whales, or Delphinus dolphins, as well as certain mammals, flying foxes, and birds, olibirds, all use sound to create an extremely accurate acoustic images. However, unlike their human counterparts, neither bats nor dolphins require an intermittent screen to interpret echoes. They simply see the shape of sound. Bats, for example, create frequencies modulated FM images by producing constant frequency signals, 0.5 to 100 microseconds, or ms, microseconds, and FM signals 0.5 to 10 ms in their larynx. The respondent echoes are then translated into nerve discharges in the auditory cortex, enabling the bat not only to determine an insect's velocity and direction through a synaptic interpretation of Doppler shifts, but to pinpoint its location to within a fraction of a millimeter. As Michael J. Buckingham noted in the mid-'80s, imaging performed by human eye is neither active nor passive. The eye does not need to produce a signal to see, nor does the object need to produce a signal in order to be heard. In order to be seen. An object merely needs to be illuminated. Based on these observations, the already mentioned formula reflects a more accurate understanding of vision with the following refinement. Sound plus time is equal to acoustic touch. As Glowcaster murmured, I see it feelingly. Unfortunately, humans lack the sophisticated neural hardware present in bats and whales. The blind must rely on the feeble light of fingertips and the painful shape of the crackled chin of a cracked shin. Ooh. Echolocations comes down to the crude assessment of simple sound modulations, whether in dull reply of a tapping cane or the low, eerie fluttering in one simple word. Perhaps your word flung down empty hallways long past midnight. We're back to Johnny. You don't need me to point out the intensely personal nature of this passage. Frankly, I'd have wrecked a quick skip past I'd have recommended a quick skip past the whole echo ramble were it not for the 6 lines, especially the last bit. Perhaps your word conjuring up, at least for me, one of those deep piercing reactions, the kind that misses a ventricular, the old man making his way, feeling around the walls of another evening, a slow and tedious progress, but one which begins to yield somehow the story of his own creature darkness, taking me completely by surprise, a sudden charge from out of the dullest moment, jaws lunging open, claws protracting, and just so you understand where I'm coming from, consider, long past midnight, one claw, and empty hallways another. Don't worry, Lou didn't buy it either, but at least he bought a couple of rounds that night. 2 nights ago, we were checking out the Sky Bar, hemorrhaging dough on drinks, but Lou can only cough hard and then laugh real hard, coronary-like. Hoss, the claw's made of bones, just like stilts made of steel. Sure, I said, but it was loud there, and the crowd kept both of us from hearing correctly. And while I wanted to believe Lude's basics, I couldn't. There was something just so awful in the old man's utterance. I felt a terrible empathy for him. Then, living in that tiny place, permeated with the odor of age, unless blinks against the darkness, his words, my word, maybe even your word, added to this, and ringing inside me like some awful dream over and over again, modulating significantly, slowly, pitching my own defenses into something entirely different, until the music of the recurrence drew into relief my own scars drawn long ago, over 2 decades ago, and with more than a claw, a stiletto, or even an ancient Samuel O'Reilly 1891, and these scar torrents ripped, bleeding, and stuttering for what they are, first of all, his scars. The kind only bars of an EKG can accurately remember. A more precise, if incomplete history, Q waves deflecting downward at what must be considered the commencement of the QRS complex, which is when you see the telling the story of past effraction, that awful endurance and eventual letting go, the failure which began it all in the first place, probably right after one burning maze, but still yet another of the other loss, a horrible violence before coming of that great whale, before the final drift nod, macking skid, twist and topple, his own burning years, before the long rest coming in its own way, its own nightmare, perhaps even of its own folds of another unprotected sleep, so I'd like to imagine. Silvering wings, fragmenting and scattering like fish scales flung on a jet stream, and above the clouds, and every epic venture still suggested in those delicate light-cradled borders, other lands sweeping the world like a whimper, a hand. If a salmon scale still slips through the words as easily as the palm prisms of salt will always slip through fingers, shimmering, raining, confused, and no matter how spectacular, forever unable to prevent his fall down through the silver, the salmon, away from the gold and the myriad of games held in just that word, suggesting it might have even been Spanish gold, though this makes no difference, still tumbling in rim, dying and embered even, or never in a different light, and not waking this time before the hit, but sleeping right through, the slamming into the ground at terminal velocity 2, the pound, the bounce, what kind of ground air emergency code would that mark mean? That was all one sentence without a period, chat. The opposition of L's, not understood, probably just X marks the spot, unable to proceed, then in an awful second arc, the second descent after the sound. Wait, is chat on? Oh my gosh, chat's not even on. I'm stupid. You guys can't even see yourself on the screen. It should be over there now. Wait, I guess over here? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, you guys, perfect. Perfect. We'd love to see it. Oh, we'd love to see that, chat. Beautiful. You guys are just right above the sub goal. Hell yeah. Okay. Proceeded in an awful second arc and second descent after the sound, the realization of what sleep had just now delivered, the bloody handmaiden, this time her toiling fingers wet with boiling deformation, oozing in the mutilations of birth, heartless and unholy, black with afterbirth, miscreated, changeling and foul, with no one besides him could prevent, but rather might have even caused in mind too, this unread trauma driving him to consciousness with a scream, not even a word, a scream, and even that never heard. So not scream, but as the clutch of life held by will alone. No 911, no call at all, just his own misunderstanding of the reality that had broken into the hall, the silence that then of a woman and only son, describing in an agonizing hour all it takes to let go, broken, bleeding, ragged, twisted, savage, torn, and dying too, so permanently wronged, though for many years gone untold, unseen, reminiscent of another silver shape, so removed and yet so dear, kept on a cold gold chain, years on, this fistful of twitching injured life, finally recovering on its own until eventually, like a seed conceived, born and grown, the story of its injured beat survives long enough to destroy and devour by the simple telling of its fall. All his hope, his home, his love, the very color of his flesh, and the dark marrow of his bone. You okay, Trot? Lude asked, but I saw a strange glimmer everywhere, confined to the sharp oscillations of yellow and blue, as if my retinal view suddenly included with the reflective blessings of light, an unearthly conclusion with scent and sound, registering all possibilities of harm, every threat, every move, and even with that grinning and meeting in din 1001 possible clause. Of course, Lude didn't see it. Oh, that's a break. We do not man. I'm losing. Feels like I'm losing my mind. I know, right? It's such a good song. I think I'll put this on the ad break. It fits so well with the book, too. Feels like a man. Very good for the story. Yeah, I know, right? All right, give me just 1 second to finish one thing up, chat, then we'll go back to the story. Because the ad break just ended. Oh, do I have anything on March 24th, chat? Give me 1 second here. I think we have a live session that day. No, we don't. Cool. Feels like I'm losing. Every day I'm losing my mind. daddy. I forgot that this is on this playlist, chat. That's so funny. Yourself, defend yourself. Daddy's the one you should blame. You terminate, assassinate. No, the finer points can wait, but first you gotta say my name. Iron jumper, that won't stop you. All right, chat. Sorry, I had to send off a little link for a future stream plan, but we are so Nickelback. Of course, Lou didn't see it. He was blind, maybe even right. He was blind, maybe even right. We drove down Sunset and soon veered south into the flats, a party somewhere, an important gathering of E-heads and coke-heads. Lude would never feel how empty halls long past midnight could slice inside of you, though I'm not so sure he wasn't sliced up just the same. Not seeing the rip doesn't mean you automatically get to keep clear of the "hey, I'm bleeding" part. To feel, though, you have to care, and as we walked out of the blue-lit patio and discovered a motorcycle sputtering up oil and bubbles from the bottom of the pool while on the diving board, two men shoved flakes of ice up a woman's bleeding nostrils, her shirt off, her bra nearly transparent. I knew Lude would never care much about the dead. Maybe he was right. Maybe some things are best left untouched. Of course, he didn't know the dead like I did, and so when he absconded with a bottle of Jack from the kitchen, I did my best to join him. Obliterate my own cavities and graves. But come morning, despite my headache and the vomit on my shirt, I knew I'd failed. Inside me, a long, dark hallway already caressed the other music of a single word, and what's worse, despite the amazements of chemicals, continued to grow. Back to Zampano. The study of architectural acoustics focuses on a rich interplay between sound and interior design. Consider, for example, how an enclosed space will naturally increase sound presence and raise the frequency. Even though they are usually difficult to calculate, resonance frequencies, also known as eigenfrequencies or natural frequencies, can easily be determined for a perfectly rectangular room with smooth walls, and following the formula describes the resonance frequencies F in a room. With a length of L and a width of W and a height of H, where velocity of sound equals C, such that F is equal to C over 2 times N over L squared plus M over W squared plus P over H squared to the 1/2 hertz. Notice that if L, W, and H all equal infinity, then the frequency will be 0. Along with the resonance frequencies, the study of sound also takes into account waves, wave acoustic, rays, wave acoustics, ray acoustics, diffusion, and steady-state pressure levels, as well as the sound of absorption and transmission through walls. A careful examination of dynamics involved in absorption reveals how incident sound waves are converted to energy. In the case of porous material, the subsurface lattice of intersects translates sound waves into heat. Nevertheless, above and beyond the details of frequency shifts and volume fluctuations, the physics of otherness, what matters most is a sound's delay. Point of fact, the human ear cannot distinguish one sound wave from another sound wave from the same sound wave if it returns less than 50 milliseconds. Therefore, for anyone to hear a reverberation requires a certain amount of space. At 68 degrees Fahrenheit, sound travels approximately 1,130 feet per second. A reflective surface must stand at least 56.5 feet away in order for a person to detect doubling of her voice. In other words, to hear an echo, regardless of whether eyes are open or closed, is to have already seen a sizable space. Myth makes echo the subject of longing and desire. Physics makes echo the subject of distance and design. Where emotion and reason are considered, both claims are accurate. And where there is no echo, there is no description of space or love. There is only silence. There's something more, and this is back to Johnny, by the way. There's something more at work here, some sort of antithetical reasoning and proof making, and what about light, all of which actually made sense to me at a certain hour before midnight, or at least came over or at least came close to making sense. Problem was, Lude interrupted my thoughts when he came over, and after much discussion, not to mention shots of tequila and a nice haircut, convinced me to share a bag of mushrooms with him. And in spite of getting violently ill in the aisle of a certain 7-Eleven, me, not him, led me to after-hours party where I soon became engrossed in a green-eyed brunette, Lucy, who had no intentions of letting our dance end at the nightclub, and yet in our sheet-twisting, lightless dance on the end on my floor, her own features, those pale legs, soft arms, the fragile collarbone tracing a shadow of can't write the word, invariably became intertwined and permanently entangled, even entirely replaced by images of a completely different woman, relatively new or not new at all, but for reasons unknown to me, still continuing to endure as my center to my thoughts, her first encountered in the company of Lude and my boss at the place my boss likes to call the Ghost. The problem is that in his mind, this ghost actually refers to two places, the Garden of Eden on La Brea and the Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset. How or why this came about is impossible to trace. Private nomenclature seems to rapidly develop in a tight set upon circles. Though truth be told, we were only set upon a good day. Hair's getting my eye. And tight here should be taken pretty loosely. How then, you ask, do you know what's being referred to when ghost gets mentioned? You don't. You just end up at one or the other. Often the rainbow, though not always the rainbow. You see how my boss defines the ghost varies day to day, depending on mostly on his mood and appetite. Consequently, the previously mentioned pretty loosely should probably be struck and restated as very, very loosely. Anyway, what am I to tell you about one of those rare evenings when we actually all got together? My boss was chattering incessantly about his junk days in London and how he'd contemplated sobriety and what those contemplations had been like. Eventually, he detoured into a long-winded non-stories about his art school experience in Detroit. Lots of, hey, my thing for that whole time thing was really a kind of art thing or something, which was about when I hauled out my pad of sketches, because no matter what you made of his BS, you still couldn't fault him for his work. He was the best, one of the best, and every tatted local knew it. Truth be told, I'd been waiting for a chance for a while. I've been waiting for this chance for a while, keen on getting his out of the shop perspective on my efforts and what efforts they were. Diligent designs sketched over the months in tinted colors of cinnabar, lemon, celadon, and indigo, incarnated in the scales of dragons, the bark of ancient roads, shields wielded by generations, cast aside in the oily umber of shadow and blood, not to speak of lifeless trees prevailing against indifferent skies, or colossal vessels asleep in prehistoric settlement miles beneath even the faintest suggestion of light. At least that's how I would describe them. Even one meticulously rendered on tracing paper, crackling like fire, whether touched a multitude of pages which my boss briefly examined before handing them back to me. Take up typing, he grunted. Well, that's nice, I thought. At least the next step was pretty clear. Some act of violence would be necessary. I love that. I'm going to reiterate that line, chat. At least the next steps were clear. Some act of violence would be necessary. And so it was that before another synapse could fire within my bad-off labyrinth brain, he was already lying on the floor. Or should I say, his mangled body was lying on the floor. His head remained in my hands, twisted off like a cap. Not as difficult as I imagined. The first turn definitely the toughest, necessitating the breaking of the cervical vertebrae and the snapping of a spinal cord. But after another 6 or so turns, and voila, the head was off. Nothing could be easier. Time to go bowling. My boss smiled and said hello, but he wasn't smiling, or he wasn't saying hello to me. Somehow, she was already standing there right in front of him, right in front of me, talking to him, reminiscing, touching his shoulder, even winking at me and Lude. Wow, out of nowhere, out of the blue. Where had she come from, or for that matter, when? Of course, my boss didn't introduce her. He left me to gape, and I couldn't even imagine twisting off his head for a second time, as that would mean losing sight of her, which I found myself quite unwilling to do. Fortunately, after the evening, she began dropping by the shop a lot, after wearing these daisy sunglasses and each time taking me completely off guard. She still drives me nuts. Just thinking of her now, and I'm lost in the smell of her, the way of her, and everything she conjures up inside me. A mad rush of folly and oddly muted lust, sensation, sublimed faster than I can follow into, oh hell, I don't know what into. I probably shouldn't even be using a word like sublime, but that's beside the point. Her hair reminding me of shiny gold desert wind braised in a hot August sun, her hips curving like coastal norths, tits rising and falling beneath her blue sweatshirt, the way the ocean will do long after the storm has passed. She's always a little out of breath when she climbs the flight of stairs. Wait, where did I just... when she climbs the flight of stairs leading into the shop, one glance at her, even now in the glass of my mind, and I want to take off, travel with her. Who knows where either, somewhere my desires suddenly informed by something deeper, even unknown, pouring into me, drawn off, I skipped so many lines, chat. My desire informed, suddenly unknown, drawn off some peculiar reserve, tracing thoughts of the drive she and I would take. Lungs full of the pine, rasping air, out tracing something unpleasant, something burning. In fact, the entire coast, along with tens of thousands of acres of island forest, is burning, but we're leaving. We're getting away. We're free. Our hands battered by the same clutch we're holding on. I don't know what to do, but holding on just the same, and cheeks streaked with wind, tears. Now I think of it, I guess we're on a motorcycle, a Triumph. Isn't that what Lude always talks about, ascending into a colder but brighter climbs? And I don't know anything about bikes, let alone how to drive one. And there I go again. She does that to me. Like I said, drives me nuts. Hello. That was the first word she ever said to me in the shop. Not like hi either, more like hello, is anyone home? Hence the question mark. I wasn't even looking at her when she said it, just staring blankly down at my equally blank pad of tracing paper, probably thinking something similar to all these ridiculous, sappy thoughts I just now recounted about road trips and forest fires and motorcycles, remembering her, even though she was right there in front of me, only a few feet away. Hey, asshole, my boss yelled. Hang up the fucking pants. What's the matter with you? Something would have to be done about him. Before I could hurl him through a pane of glass window into the traffic below, she smiled and handed me her bright pink flip-flops and white Adidas sweats. My boss was lucky this magnificent creature just saved his life. Gratefully, I received her clothes, lifting them from her fingertips like they were some sort of sacred vesture bestowed upon me by the Virgin Mary herself. The hardest part I found was trying not to stare too long at her legs. Very tricky to do, near impossible. Especially with her just standing there in a black G-string, her feet barely sweating on a naked floor. I did my best to smile in a way that would conceal my awe. Thank you, I said, thinking I should kneel. Thank you, she insisted. Those were the next two words she ever said to me. And wow, I don't know, but why, but her voice went off in my head like a symphony, a great symphony, a sweet symphony, a great fucking sweet symphony. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm absolutely shit out of symphonies. What's your name? The total suddenly climbed to an impossible 6 words. Johnny, I mumbled, promptly earning 4 more words, and just like that, nice to meet you, she said in a way that almost sounded like a psalm. And then, even though she clearly enjoyed the effect she was having on me, she turned away with a wink, leaving me to ponder and perhaps pray. At least I had her 10 words. Hello, thank you, what's your name, nice to meet you. 10 whole fucking words. Wow, wow, wow. And hard as this may be for you to believe, I was reeling. Even after she left the shop an hour or so later, I was still giving serious thoughts to petitioning all major religions in order to have her deified. In fact, I was so caught up in this thought, there was even a moment when I failed to recognize my boss. I had absolutely no clue who he was. I just stared at him thinking to myself, who's this dumb mutant? And why the hell did he get up here? And how the hell did he get up here? Which it turns out I didn't think, but accidentally said aloud, causing all sorts of mayhem to ensue. Not worth delving into now. Quick note here, if this crush/swooning stuff is hard for you to stomach, if you never had a similar experience, then you should come to grips with the fact that you've got a TV dinner for a heart, and you might want to consider climbing inside a microwave and turning it on high for at least an hour, which, if you do consider, only goes to show you the kind of idiot that you truly are, because microwaves are way too small for anyone, let alone you, to climb into. Yeah, no shit. He's calling me out like that. Damn. Quick second note. If the last paragraph doesn't apply to you, you may skip it and proceed to this next part. As for her real name, I still don't know. She's a stripper at some place near the airport. She has a dozen names. The first time she came into my shop, she wanted one of her tattoos retouched. Just an inch away from my perfectly shaved pussy, she announced, very matter-of-factly, only to add somewhat coyly slipping 2 fingers beneath her G-string and pulling it aside. No need to wink now, the happiest place on earth. Suffice it to say, the second I saw the rabbit, the second I started calling it her Thumper. I do admit, it seems a little strange even to me to realize, even after 4 months, I'm still swept up in her. Lude sure as hell doesn't understand it. One, because I've fallen for a stripper. Fuck and fall for have a very different meanings, Haas. The first one you do as much as you can. The second one you never, ever do. And 2, because she's older than me. If you're gonna reel for a stripper, he advises, you should at least reel for a younger one. They're sexier and not as bent. Which is true. She does have a good 6 years on me, but what can I say? I'm taken. I love how enthralled she remains by this festival of living, nothing reserved or even remotely ashamed about who she is or what she does. Always taking blue streak to my boss about her 3-year-old child, her boyfriend, her words, always winding up in a way that feels to wake up wide awake. Everything about her awakening at every moment. Alive to the world and its quirky opportunities, a sudden rite of spring. Thumper's spring, though spring's already sprung. Rabbit, and now April's ruling. April's looming, April's fooling. Around and yet another round for this year ruling April's fool. Yeah, I know, this shit's gotten ridiculous. Even worse, I still feel like I could continue in that vein for a year, or even maybe decades. And yet, listen to this. To date, I have hardly said a word to her. Don't have a decent explanation for my silence either. Maybe it's my boss and his guard dog glare. Maybe it's her. I suspect it's her. Every time she visits, though, I admit there haven't been that many visits. She overwhelms me. It doesn't matter that she always gives me a wink or sometimes even in a full-throated laugh. I call her Thumper, Hi Thumper, Bye Thumper, the only words I can really muster. She still really only exists for me as a strange mixture of daydream and present-day edge, by which I mean something without a past or a future, an icon of idol of sorts for some reasons forbidden to me, but seductive beyond belief and probably relief, her image feeling permanently fixed within me, but not new, more like it's been there all along, even if I know that's not true. And come last night, going so far as to entwine, entangle, and finally replace her with, cannot write the word, of Thumper's flashing eyes, her arching lips, her heart-ending moans, those I had imagined an ongoing list so minute and distracting that long after, when the sheets were gathered wet with sex, cold with rest, I do not know who lay beside me. Seeing this stranger, the vessel of my daydreams, I withdrew to the toilet to shower, to my table, enough racket and attachment to communicate an unfair request, but before her she heard it, and without a word, dressed and without a smile, requested a brush without a kiss left, leaving me alone to return to this passage where I discover the beginnings of a since taken and strewn, leading me away on what I guess amounts to another hopeless digression. Perhaps when I'm finished, I'll remember what I had hoped to say in the first place. Is this what I think it is? So this chapter is an extremely long one. We're gonna end off here because this is a pretty nice spot since we're going back to Zampano's writings. So I think we're gonna call it for today, chat. Let me go ahead and bookmark the page. If you guys would like to see more of this, feel free to join in every Tuesday for a while now. You can also join in and check out all of our socials, our other links, our merch, and all of that at thetrashcan.space. Alrighty, give me 15.2 seconds, chat, as I look. Who the fuck is live right now? All right, chat. Let's go say hello to. Oh, who do we want to say hello to, chat? Shoot, I always struggle with this, chat. I always struggle to raid channels. Because there's like so many friends I want to say hello to. Let's go ahead and say hello to. Let's say hello to Amber. That's a new person we met the other day, chat. If you guys would like to use our raid message, it is right there. It is free. By that, I mean free if you follow to use all of the emotes. So, yeah, thank y'all very, very much for joining in today, for listening to me ramble and probably struggle to read quite a bit of the time. I very much appreciate it. And I will see y'all. If I can rope my girlfriend into doing a stream with me, I'll see you guys this week. If not, I'll see you next week.